Good afternoon. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchmen on the Pod. We are going to continue in our book reading today by Bill Hughes, and it's The Secret Terrorists. We are on Chapter 7, and this one is entitled World War II. World War II was the most extensive and devastating war in recorded history. Hundreds of thousands of people died in this war. Most people have no idea why this war was fought or what the cause of this war was. Wars do not just happen. They are planned and executed by people high in governments for their own advantage. President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, in politics, in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. Let us take a look at who planned World War II. Popes and their Jesuitical agents have been and are the instigators of wars. And while the world is having real pain, Rome is having champagne. Jeremiah D. Crowley, a former Catholic priest. Romanism, a menace to the nation. Minutes Publishing, page 144. The Pope was just as much in the Second World War as was Hitler and Catholic Mussolini, and therefore just as guilty of the murder of 6 million Jews. In fact, popes have been instigated most, if not all, the European wars down through the centuries. F. Paul Peterson, Peter's tomb, recently discovered in Jerusalem, page 63. Quoted in is Alberto For Real, Sidney H. Hunter, Chick Publishing, page 41. One may say quite specifically that in 1914, the Roman Church started the series of hellish wars. It was then that the people began to swell into a veritable torrent. Edmund Paris, The Vatican Against Europe, The Wycliffe Press, page 48. These are not the only reputable authors who implicate the papacy as the instigators of World War II, as well as all other wars. In light of these statements, it is sickening to hear of the recent meeting held in Asti, Italy, where John Paul II was quoted as saying, "Violence never again, war never again, terrorism never again. The papacy has instigated and is still instigating wars, and the Pope has the audacity to make that statement." America is currently conducting a war on terrorism. The above statements indicate that the papacy is responsible for making this war on terrorism necessary. That is insane. George Bush declared in USA Today, September 17, 2001, that his administration is preparing a crusade against terrorism. In past history, crusades were religious wars fought on behalf of papal interests. Was President Bush telling us that his war on terrorism is being fought to further papal interests? Adolf Hitler was guilty of all kinds of atrocities during the Second World War. Was he really responsible for these atrocities, or was he simply carrying out orders? Consider who was pulling the strings in Hitler's Germany. In Germany, the papal nuncio in Berlin, Major Pasili, and Franz von Papen, privy chamberlain to the Pope, advocated a union with Rome and concentrated on the overthrow of Weimar Republic. The German Catholics were hostile to Nazism, but were informed that the Pope himself was favorably disposed towards Hitler. Consequently, the Catholic of Zentrum axis of all parliamentary majorities voted full rights to Hitler on January 30th, 1933. This operation was promptly followed, as in Italy, by the concluding of a concordate, which was most advantageous to the Roman Church. The German episcopate swore allegiance to the Führer, and Catholic youth organizations combined with those of the Nazis. Edmund Paris, The Vatican Against Europe, The Wycliffe Press, page 15. The Vatican helped Hitler to gain power and then helped him consolidate his grip on Germany. This was done in part by advising the Catholic Party of Germany to vote for Nazi candidates. The Catholic vote gave Hitler the majority he needed to legally form a government in 1933. Further to this, the Vatican ordered Catholic members of the Reichstag Parliament to support legislation giving Hitler the power to rule by decree. This measure gave Hitler the dictatorial power he needed to destroy the German communists. The whole Vatican-Hitler bargain had been conducted in secret before Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933. In June of the same year, Hitler and the Vatican signed a concordat under terms of which the Church swore allegiance to the Nazi regime. Excuse me. Soon afterward, Catholic Franz von Rapin II, in command to Hitler, put the essence of the Hitler-Vatican allegiance or alliance very succinctly in these words. The Third Reich, let's see, how's that worded? The Third Reich, he said, is the first power which not only recognizes but puts into practice the high principles of the papacy. Avro, Manhattan, the Vatican, Moscow, Washington Alliance, Ozark Books, quoted in Sidney Hunter. In Sidney Hunter is Alberto for real. Chick Publishing, page 42 and 43. What an amazing statement. Von Papen says that the atrocities that Hitler perpetrated during the Second World War were the principles of the papacy. Can there be any doubt that the papacy is just as evil as Hitler was and his regime? Hitler himself admits that he was helped by the methods of the Jesuit Counter-Reformation to carry on his ideological war. We have witnessed Catholicism's open support of every step taken by Nazi fascism to impose authoritarian regimes under all peoples. Leo H. Lehman, Behind the Dictators, Agora Publishing, page 36, 38, and 39. An accurate account of history places the Catholic Jesuit menace at the very heart of the Hitler regime. It was Catholic von Papen and the Catholic Zentrum Party that got Hitler into power in 1933, and to show his gratitude, Hitler's Third Reich was a model of papal principles at their worst. Hitler was merely a pawn in the hands of the Jesuits of the papacy. Who supported Hitler in war-ravaged Germany? Remember, Germany had been reduced to rags by World War I and the heinous Treaty of Versailles. Immense sums belonging to our national bank depositors have been given to Germany on no collateral security whatsoever. Billions upon billions of our money has been pumped into Germany by the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve banks. On April 27, 1932, the Federal Reserve outfit sent $750,000 belonging to American bank depositors in gold to Germany. A week later, another $300,000 in gold was shipped to Germany in the same way. About the middle of May, $12 million in gold was shipped to Germany by the Federal Reserve banks. Almost every week, there is a shipment of gold to Germany. K.S. Keenan, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Noontime Press, 1966, page 158. As we saw in a previous chapter, the Federal Reserve Bank was a creation of the Jesuits. They used it to finance their insane puppets like Adolf Hitler. Keenan states that the Federal Reserve financed Hitler and the Nazis. If the Federal Reserve Bank is controlled and run by Americans, how could it finance a deadly enemy like Hitler, who stood for everything that the Constitution condemns? In light of the Keenan statement, the Federal Reserve Bank is not American. It is our enemy, financing our enemies. Thus, it makes sense that the Jesuits-controlled bank would fund a Jesuit-controlled puppet like Adolf Hitler. Excuse me. As we saw in a previous chapter, the Federal Reserve Bank was a creation of the Jesuits. They use it to finance their insane puppets like Adolf Hitler. Keenan states that the Federal Reserve financed Hitler and the Nazis. If the Federal Reserve Bank is controlled and run by Americans, how could it finance a deadly enemy like Hitler, who stood for everything that the Constitution condemns? In light of the Keenan statement, the Federal Reserve Bank is not American. It is our enemy, financing our enemies. Thus, it makes sense that the Jesuit-controlled bank would fund a Jesuit-controlled puppet like Adolf Hitler. I just reread the same thing. I'm so sorry. From Jesuit-controlled Germany under Hitler, let us turn to the country of Spain and Francisco Franco. Spain was going through convulsions toward the end of the 1800s. She went back and forth between a Roman Catholic monarchy and an attempt to free Republican government. Finally, in the 1930s, bodies of babies were discovered under several convents in Spain. I remember reading this. Doctors discovered that these infants had died as the result of suffocation. You see, nuns and priests had engaged in adultery, and the unwanted babies were killed at birth. The Catholic people of Spain, who knew nothing of these awful crimes, were outraged by the discoveries, and many laws were passed that hindered the papacy's power in Spain, according to ex-Jesuit Alberto Rivera. In 1936, the new Spanish Inquisition exploded. It was called the Spanish Civil War, secretly orchestrated in the Vatican. The Pope excommunicated the heads of the Spanish Republic and declared war between the Holy See and Madrid. Under the banner of the Vatican, the Muslim forces invaded the Canary Islands and then attacked southern Spain. When the Inquisition accomplished its goals, Spain was in ruins, bleeding and beaten, but safety back in the hands of the Vatican. General Franco eventually became the Roman Catholic dictator of Spain. Franco's government was recognized August 3, 1937 by the Vatican, just 20 months before the Civil War ended. Jack Chick, Alberto, pages 1, 3, and 6. Or parts 1, 3, and 6. Chick's Publishing, pages 12, 21, 28, and 29. When Franco marched on Madrid nearing the close of the late Civil War in Spain, when he was reinstating the Catholic government and overthrowing the people's government the Protestants had set up a few years before, he said, "I have the city of Madrid who will betray the city into my hands when I get there." Albert Garner, The Devil's Masterpiece, The Mystery of Iniquity, Blessed Hope Foundation, page 70 and 71. On March 31, 1934, the Pact of Rome was signed and pledged support of Mussolini and Hitler for the rebellion. The Holy War broke out in 1937. In the midst of war, the Vatican gave de jure recognition to the government of Franco, its sword bearer, who was later to be decorated with the Supreme Order of Christ. Blessed be the guns if the gospel flowers in their wake. Soon, the Catholic action was to spread its tyranny across the ruined country. Pax Christi, Edmund, Paris, the Vatican against Europe. The Wycliffe Press, page 15. Benito Mussolini was highly esteemed by the Jesuits of Rome. He was their man of providence, who restored Vatican City to the papacy in 1929. What was happening in Europe between the two massacres? In Italy, secret negotiations took place between papal agents and Mussolini, the man of providence. The priest Don Terzo, chief of the Catholic group, had full rights voted to the Deuce of November 1922. Then came the Lateran Treaty to seal the union of fascism and the papacy, the conquest of Ethiopia blessed by the clergy, and on Good Friday 1939, the aggression against Albania, page 15. According to Pius XI, Mussolini is making rapid headway and with elemental strength will conquer all in his path. Mussolini is a wonderful man. Do you hear me? A wonderful man. The future is his. Page 69. For today, Rome considers the fascist regime the nearest to its dogmas and interests. We have not merely the Reverend Jesuit Father Croflin praising Mussolini's Italy as a Christian democracy, but Civiltà Cattolica, Hughes, organ of the Jesuits, says quite frankly, fascism is the regime that corresponds most closely to the concepts of the Church of Rome. Pierre van Passin, Days of Our Years, Hillman Curry, page 465. We read a previous quote that said that Hitler put into practice the ruthless principles of the papacy. Now we see that Mussolini did the same thing. It wasn't just the three Axis powers of Europe with their Catholic puppets that did Rome's bidding during the World War II. Franklin Roosevelt, President of the United States, also carried out Rome's wishes. Cardinal Spellman was offered an unprecedented opportunity by Roosevelt that would necessitate leaving his archdiocese for months on end. The astounding proposal Roosevelt put forth was that Spellman act as a clandestine agent for him in the four corners of the world. It would be the Archbishop's job to contact chief estates in the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and Africa. He would carry messages for the president, offered him an opportunity to wield more power than any other American religious figure had ever had. Spellman would move as an equal among the greatest figures on the world political stage, but few people were certain about what the Archbishop did during his far-flung travels. His clandestine work raised questions at home about the role of a religious figure involved deeply in the governmental affairs. John Cooney, the American Pope, Times Book, page 124 and 125. Spellman's first allegiance was to Pope Pius XII, and yet he was used by Franklin Roosevelt as his own personal agent. Of Roosevelt we read again. Roosevelt and Eisenhower approved of the forced repatriation of some 6 million Orthodox Christian people back to Russia, many of whom were tortured or killed after they reached their destination. Two Russians who have written about this abominable decision by these American leaders were Nikola Tolstovov and Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The Americans called this reparation Operation Keelhaul, after the naval form of torture where the prisoner is hauled under the keel of a ship by a rope tied to the prisoner's body to be severely cut by the barnacles on the bottom of the ship. What? These 6 million individuals were not only soldiers who had fought on the side of the Germans against the Russians, but they were women and children as well. Even though it was Churchill and Roosevelt who made the incredible decision to send millions of anti-communist Russians back to certain death, it was General Dwight Eisenhower who enforced Operation Keyhole with no apparent pangs of conscience. Ralph Epperson, The Unseen Hand, Published Press, page 301. Roosevelt not only used Spellman as his agent, but he carried out the Jesuits' goal of annihilating as many Orthodox Christians as possible. The Jesuits sought to destroy the Orthodox Christians of Siberia in World War I, and with this repatriation at the end of World War II, they destroyed many more millions of Russian Orthodox Christians. Roosevelt, Eisenhower, and Churchill carried out the Jesuits' bloody plan with considerable success. Jesuit General Count Hulk von Lodowski was disposed to organize on the common basis of anti-communism a certain degree of collaboration between the German Secret Service and the Jesuit order. Von Lodowski considered the forthcoming bellicose settling of accounts between Russia and Germany as inevitable, and the Bachelor Neckarine, March 27, 1942, did not hesitate to write, "One of the questions arising from German activity in Russia, which is of supreme importance to the Vatican, is the question of the evangelization of Russia. This is confirmed by Father Hughes himself in a book covered by the imprimatur. During the summer of 1941, Hitler appealed to all Christian forces. He authorized Catholic missionaries to go to the new Eastern territories. Nor has it been forgotten that in France, Cardinal Baudard and Major Mayol de Loup recruited the LVF for the crusade against Russia. Edmund Paris, The Vatican Against Europe, Wycliffe Press, pages 240 and 241. While the Orthodox Christians of Russia were being exterminated by the papacy, there was a similar massacre going on in Yugoslavia. Some of the many books that have been written about the atrocity of World War II include Convert or Die by Edmund Paris, The Vatican's Holocaust by Avro Manhattan, and Ravening Wolves by Monica Farrell. These books all discuss the murder of around 1 million Orthodox Christians during the World War II by the Catholic Utashi. On the cover of Farrell's book we read, "This is the record of torture and murder committed in Europe in 1941 to 1943 by an army of Catholic actionists known as, led by monks and priests, and even participated in by nuns. The victims suffered and died in the cause of liberty and freedom of conscience. The least we can do is read the record of their sufferings and keep in mind that it happened not in the Dark Ages, but in our own enlightened generation." Utashi is another name for Catholic action. Monica Farrell, Ravening Wolves, Protestant Publications. That was on the cover. The mass expulsion of forced conversion of the Orthodox Christians to Roman Catholicism was on the agenda. All measures aiming at the elimination of Serbdom in Croatia were carried out under the slogan enunciated by one of the Croatian ministers: "We shall massacre the first third of the Serbs, expel the second third from the country, and force the final third to accept the Catholic faith, whereby they will be absorbed by the Catholic element. Liezo im Caustic Holocaust in the independent state of Croatia." Liberty, page 18. The papacy was still trying to exterminate Orthodox Christians in Serbia in the late 1990s. The papacy used the United States as their bully in that conflict to bomb Serbia. The real butcher of the Balkans is the Pope and the Catholic Church, not Slobodan Milosevic. They are trying the wrong person for war crimes. Another Jesuit goal of World War II was to make things so bad for the Jewish race that they would want to return to Palestine. Near the end of World War I, the Balfour Declaration was signed, enabling the Jews to go back home to Palestine. This was to be their permanent home. However, many Jews had found success in various parts of the world and did not want to return. When World War II and the Jewish Holocaust occurred, the persecuted Jews longed for a place to call home, and many returned to Palestine. In 1948, Israel was declared to be a sovereign nation. According to Cooney's book, The American Pope, page 187, Francis Spellman had been the deciding factor in getting the Israel accepted as a sovereign state. Why would the Jesuits use Hitler to annihilate the Jews and then have Jesuit Cardinal Francis Spellman provide a home in Palestine for them? Watch carefully. The Vatican has sought to destroy the Jews for 1,000 years. Behind the Zionist banner, there was to be found the ancient messianic hope for the coming of a global theocracy. As predicted by all the seers and prophets of Zion, it was to be a theocracy in which Jehovah, not Christ, was to be king. The specter of the creation of such a theocracy has haunted the inner chambers of the Catholic Church from her earliest inception and still is a dominant fear. In Vatican eyes, therefore, the millenarian yearning for a global Hebrew theocracy represents a deadly threat to the ecclesiastical teachings of the Catholic Church. When translated into concrete political terms, such as a view spelled not only rivalry but implacable enmity. Adro, Manhattan, The Vatican Moscow Washington Alliance, Ozark Books, page 169 and 170. On the surface, the nation of Israel and Palestine seemed to be a grand opportunity for the Jews to be able to have their own country. However, what has been the result of the Jews returning to Palestine? Since they were granted sovereign status in 1948, the Jews have been in one ravaging battle after another with the Arabs. Many Jews have died, just as the Jesuits hoped and knew would happen. With the Jews returned to Israel and Palestine, the Jesuits hoped to cause such bloodshed in that part of the world that the world would cry out for a peacemaker to come to the region. And who would be that peacemaker? The Pope of Vatican City, of course. The Jesuits have long wanted to restore the Pope's temporal power. When the Pope is given Solomon's throne in Jerusalem, the long-awaited goal will be accomplished. The war on terrorism that originated September 11, 2001, which George Bush calls a crusade, could certainly aggravate the trouble in that region to bring about the reign of the pontiff from Jerusalem. The Jesuits failed in their attempt to have a world governing body following World War I. They accomplished their sinister goal after World War II. Following the war, the weary, aching world was conditioned to accept an international government, and the United Nations was born. Since the creation of the United Nations in 1945, this so-called peacekeeping body has failed miserably in keeping peace around the world. Why? Because keeping peace is not their purpose, even though they continue to claim that it is. There are presently some 83 different wars around the world. However, it has certainly been instrumental in suppressing liberty-loving people. Cantaga and Rhodesia are just two examples of nations crushed by UN forces. The United Nations has worked tirelessly to restore temporal power of the papacy, its purpose from the beginning. We will look at one more of the Jesuits' purposes for World War II. It was payback time for the Japanese. In the late 1500s, the Japanese had welcomed all foreigners who wanted to trade with her. Catholic missionaries had been welcomed too. After a time, the Catholic missionaries became intolerant of all other beliefs. Unrest and persecution recruited, and Japan became a bloodbath for many decades. Finally, in 1639, the Exclusion Edict was passed. It stated, "For the future let none, so long as the sun illuminates the world, presume to sail to Japan, not even in the quality of ambassadors." And this declaration is newer to be revoked on pain of death. Adro, Manhattan, Vietnam. Why did we go? Chick Publishing, page 153. For nearly 200 years, the ports of Japan were closed to Jesuit missionaries who had sought to take over Japan for the proud Pope. Through the latter half of the 19th century, military power was used against the island nation. This softened her until the awful bloody conflict of World War II in the South Pacific, culminating in the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan was brought to her knees forever. Payback had come. And then next time will be chapter 8, and that will be entitled John F. Kennedy. All right, brothers and sisters, that reading is complete. We will pick it up next time. Hopefully it won't be such a long period in between. You know, all I could say is take this to the Lord in prayer. Ask him to show you what is truth. You know, we need to go to the truth, who is Jesus Christ. You know, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And we must go to him and seek his face and ask him to open it up, to give us the discernment that we need through his precious Holy Spirit that he has given to each and every one of us. I love you all so very much. Keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you will not sin against God or be deceived. Until next time, I do love you all so very, very much, and be blessed. Be blessed, be blessed.